This map shows from 1871 the rail trail as it proceeded from about the 5.5 mile marker up along the railroad tracks to about the 7.5 mile marker. This is the section that we know as Sweet Hollow. And this right here is the Sweet Hollow Road running right parallel to the railroad tracks. And down on the Sweet Hollow Road, you will notice on this old map a couple of farms indicating that they belong to someone named Sweet. This is a pretty clearly marked map, one of the best of the times. And it would be the one we would rely upon for information in regards to the many districts, school districts actually, that comprise Sheldon. This would be district number 6, and the district that encompasses our next map. The rail trail begins in Sheldon at the crossover between the Fairfield and the Sheldon town line and proceeds from there along parallel to the Sweet Hollow Road, which is appropriately named. At one point, if you look at the 1871 map, you will see 2 farm residences down this road belonging to the Sweet family, thus Sweet Holler. They were hill farmers down about this far. It was a dirt road at that point in time, but the railroad coming up through here did open up the possibilities for further expansion. We'll pick the trail up in a little while where it crosses over to Sweet Hollow Road. This is a cut from 1871 Beers map showing the railroad as it's proceeding up through the area known as Sweet Hollow. Right here are 2 Sweet farms, being T Sweet and W Sweet. From the point we're picking it up here and taking it in an orderly direction, it's going from District 6 into the next district, which is known as Olmsted Falls, currently also known as Sheldon Springs. It is at this point where the rail trail crosses over the Sweet Hollow Road, somewhere between the 6.5 and the 7 mile mark, and continues from here through this woodland and on into Sheldon Springs. Once we cross over Sweet Hollow Road for the second time, we're going to come to the 7 mile marker and the long straightaway that took the railroad down into Sheldon Springs through a fairly wooded area. There is one remarkable piece we'll cover in a minute. At this point right here, there was a road, or actually a town trail, that crossed from Sweet Hollow Road over the railroad bed, back through the woods, and up in here you can see what remains of a house or a cottage. And the road went beyond there a short distance. It's quite clearly visible on the 1871 map and some older town maps. This is coming to us just before a very deep culvert. Where we're standing right now, and for a short distance, where it's not a rail bed, it falls off dramatically down into a creek bed on both sides. Right here you can see the depths of this ravine from both sides, this being the west side and this being the east side. And thinking back to the time that the railroad was put into use, consider the amount of labor and the amount of technology it took to bridge this cavern with allowing the stream to continue underneath, but at the same time raising the roadbed up far enough to keep the train at a maximum elevation of 3 degrees. At this stop sign that we're approaching, we're at the intersection, the first intersection in Sheldon, of the rail trail with Route 105. If you're looking for a break or refreshments, right there is a mini mart store. A little further past that is the second one. When we go into the village of Sheldon Springs, we're going to have an abundance of historical things to take a look at. Here we're at the 7.5 mile marker located in the heart of Sheldon Springs. Directly ahead, the trail will cross what is now known as Mill Street, previously known as Main Street in Sheldon Springs, known previous to that as Olmstedville, Olmsted Falls. It was a settlement settled in the 1800s, included in later years was St. Anthony's Catholic Church, the mill, and all of the mill houses that we'll take into account later. So we're going to move from 7.5 up towards 8.5. We're now at the intersection of what is currently called Mill Street, previously known as Main Street, and appropriately named after the mill was constructed by Mr. Shipley around 1900. He named it Mill Street when, in fact, the mill took over most of the town and built housing for its workers, some of which are continuing to exist on Mill Street, and we'll explore in depth in a little while. This section of the 1871 Beers map shows what we knew at the time to be something called Olmsted Falls, or Olmsted Mill, depending upon how you want to call it. It was a small rural farming village, and initially it had been settled by a number of families known as Olmsted. You can see a lot of that on the map as we wander around it. You can note in this particular map that there is no paper mill, and you can see a different arrangement of the roads that exists at the present time. The first school built by the town was located down here in this particular area. Let me bring that up a little bit for you. And down as we're coming in on the rail trail, here's where the school's located right here. It's on the south side of the hamlet. The red L further up here indicates two roads going around the center of the village, and in the very center you can see an item called store. That is where the first store was located, built by Henry Maurer. Previous to being at this location, it was actually here where the homestead, where the Congress Hotel is, and it was eventually moved from there across the road and placed here in order to make a provision that when Henry Maurer and his associates sold 250 acres of land to Dr. Samuel Fitch, whose name is also noted on the map, along with a businessman called S.S.F. Carlyle in 1868. That's just 3 years before this map was drawn. And they would, at that point in time, develop something called the Congress Hotel and a commercial spring, one of many, which would be known as the Sheldon Spring. The Sheldon Spring is located right here. The Congress Hotel is located right here. We go a little further up on the map, just before we get to the bridge. Here's a grist mill and a sawmill. These, I'm not sure who built. This sawmill right here was originally built by somebody named Bancroft. And right here is, in fact, the farm of M&K Bancroft. A little further down is Olmsted, and there's the Dr. Fitch. Down on the other side of the railroad tracks, we can also see a W.E. Olmsted and an A. Olmsted, as indicated as being people who lived in the village and had houses in 1871. If you leave the trail turning left, you're on what is now known as Mill Street, previously known as Main Street in the 1871 maps. If you look directly over here, that is St. Anthony's Church. It is the third building that we know has occupied that particular space. The first one being built by Mr. Mower as a small general store. And he and his friends then sold that property to the people who built the Congress Hotel. I'll document that for you in photographs in a minute. If we proceed down to the church and turn left on Shawville Road and go to the end of the church where the parking lot starts, we'll get a glimpse of the location of the Sheldon Spring. We're standing right now on what used to be the site of the Congress Hotel, and directly ahead past the snowbank is a deep ravine. And down in that ravine is where Sheldon Spring is located. You will want to be prepared in the right season to move just past these trees and start a descent into a very deep ravine. And just about here, down in the bottom of that ravine, is a wooden cover covering a concrete cistern, which is the location of the Sheldon Springs, which is still there. Down in this location here approximately stood 2 bathhouses and a bottling plant, all of which are gone. This is an early photograph of the Congress Hotel or Congress Hall at Sheldon Springs. It is the one that was built by Mr. Carlisle and by Dr. Finch as a resort hotel for people seeking to obtain remedies through mineral waters. Notice it's a 3-story hotel. It has an addition on it. It was built prior to 1871. The cupola is at the top. You can see people actually sitting on the front porch, side porch, and horses in the front yard. If we move this back to its original size, I can proceed to in this picture, we're looking at one of the 2 bathhouses for the Congress Hotel under construction. A lot of lumber on the outside, and in fact, there's a person standing here in the doorway on a plank. So the Congress Hotel was built for the purposes of providing people with the opportunity to have a cure from all kinds of diseases, which was a fairly popular thing in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and so these businessmen took advantage of the fact that the Sheldon Spring directly behind here was in fact a mineral spring. And this picture, we're actually looking at 2 bathhouses side by side, and they do appear to be sitting down into a hollow, and that would be directly behind the hotel down in the little culvert that I'm showing you in the video walking you could actually go to. Now, everything that was here that was not used on site was bottled. And although this bottle that I'll show you is not one of the original bottles. Although we do know the exact location of the hotel, and we have been able to find the springs, which are still in existence today and could be sampled. However, be prepared to hike down a steep ravine and back up again through mud, and you'll get to the springs. We do not know the exact location of the spring houses or of the bottling plant, although there's a pretty good idea about where they are. A descriptive and historic guide to the Valley of Champlain and the Adirondacks, published in 1871, mentions the newly constructed Congress Hotel. A quote by New England, a handbook for travelers, published in 1883, reads, "The Congress Hall Hotel, located near the later spring, that is Sheldon Spring, is a large first-class house. The water flows at the rate of 14,000 gallons a day and contains a large amount of carbonate of soda with potash. It is very unusual alkaline, saline water containing more silic acid in solution than any on record. The presence of so much scenic acid is also remarkable, and with the iron and magnesium adds to the valuable constituents. The hot and cold baths in the convenient bathhouses work wonderful cures in cases of rheumatism, ursitis and skin disease, cancer, and chronic ailments." The Congress Hotel continued in existence along with the mineral water boom. As long as that lasted, the property was deeded to the Roman Catholic Diocese of Burlington on March 26, 1907, when the boom had ended. The dining room was then remodeled to create a chapel, and Father Joseph Campanot held Mass there for that particular period of time. On the night of December 19, 1908, the Congress Hall burned to the ground, and in 1911, the current St. Anthony's Catholic Church was built on the site. In addition to providing tourists with the opportunity to take baths in the mineral water and to drink the mineral water during the time they were here, most of the springs, including the Sheldon Spring, took the time to bottle the water. So down in the ravine there was a bottling plant, and bottles of water were brought up to the hotel. In the bank right directly behind the church as it exists at the present time, there is an old bottle dump where if you do enough digging you can usually come up with shards of glass. Some of them may say something in reference to Sheldon Springs, but some of them may be other bottles of things like expensive perfume or expensive body lotions or things of that nature, which were brought to the hotel for visitors. This particular bottle found on that site in the course of digging is most likely a body lotion bottle. It's unique in the degree that it definitely had a cap on it at one time, and although you really can't see it too well in video, it is multiple sided. So it is unique in its own right, and it is whole in its entirety. We are now back at the intersection of the Shawville Road with the current Mill Street, looking up Shawville Road. All of the area that you're looking at, beginning at the first tractor trailer all the way over to the mill, are documented to have been worker housing, and the original store owned by Mr. Maurer stood approximately where the first tractor trailer is. Across the road and out to the back, that old building does appear on the 1871 maps as a part of the complex of the railroad. Directly ahead, and one of the photos we'll be showing you was the president's house for the president of the mill. When James Shipley came to town and began developing the pulp mill, he took the town over and turned it into a company town. Right now, where the Sheldon Volunteer Fire Department stands, previously was occupied by a general store, documented in many of the still photographs we'll be showing you shortly. At about the same time as the Congress Hotel was being built and Enterprise engaged in, Joseph T. Shepley came to Sheldon Springs in 1894. He was looking for opportunities for entrepreneurship, and he therefore built what became the first part of what was later known as a larger pulp mill. As early as 1895, the Missisquoi mill produced ground wood pulp. Mr. Shepley brought with him a vision of a company village acquired from his early years in southern New England. Through his influence and the predominance of the mill as the source of all good things in Olmsted Falls, the village was transformed into Sheldon Spring, home of the Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company. The mill ruled over the village for many years and continues to influence the economic and culture of the village well into the 21st century. Although the name changed from Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company to Saxton Industries and other names, and is presently known as West Rock, it is still the same mill that has been continually processing paper products for nearly 125 years. As we take a look at these mill pictures, I can give you an idea about what they're for. This is the village. This is the rail trail that we've been pursuing, but it's actually a spur going into the mill. The other portion of the railroad is down in this location here. This is what we currently call Mill Street. At that particular time, it was known as Main Street. So here's the mill complex. Here is diverted water through a dam to go in to support the power for the mill, and this is the Missisquoi River. This map is one hand-drawn from a 1982 survey conducted by the State of Vermont Historic Preservation Society. In this picture we are looking at, and we'll look at this again later, we're looking at an overhead view of Sheldon Springs shot after the mill from a easterly direction shooting west toward New York. I'll bring this up a little bit, and you can see right here is at that point what was known as the St. Albans to Richford Highway. Down here is the mill, and right over here is a unique place that we're going to talk about in a little while, and it is called School Street. Now the mill, in its unique way of building a town of its own, built the town. This in fact is a row of houses known as School Street with another item that's attached to it, which we will get to when we talk further about School Street. As we move on, this would be an overhead shot of the mill taken early on. You can notice the river flow, the mill, and up here, as we'll be seeing it a little while later, is a place called Boarding House Road. Now this Boarding House Road comes all the way down through this group of houses, and then curves and comes back down onto what here, at that particular point in time, was being called Mill Street, and it is now called the Shawville Road going to Shawville, which is a town, for all we know, never existed. Here is a picture of the original mill. (1914), Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company, Sheldon Springs. This would have been shot sometime after the picture that we showed you originally of the village. Some of this stuff is still here. This is a winter shot taken probably from an aerial balloon. We know that there's one in the area that did some photography from balloon in the early 50s. This is likely one of those. And what it does is shows us the mill in winter. Here's the mill per se. At this point in time, we're talking about this being the mill, and I can give you an idea that this is shot from a southerly direction up to a northerly direction. Yeah, this picture, we're looking at a early picture of a pile of pulpwood. This would be located on the map directly behind what is currently the fire department, and you might notice, if you're looking, that right up here is a man. And that will give you some idea about how tall that particular pulp pile was. Most of this would come in by train or come in by truck. This is again an early photo of mill housing, and I'm going to say that this one most likely was the one that occurred on what they called Mill Street at the time. It doesn't happen to be labeled all that well. Here's another picture of the mill later on. This would be in the 1950s. And here is the pulp mill again. And I think this is in the teens. So here we have a railroad car. The railroad was extremely important to the development of the mill. And in the background you can see a pulp mill, a pulp pile. The town became company, and the company even owned its own vehicles. In a early 1900s index from the Vermont Automobile Association, of the 80 vehicles registered in Sheldon, 8 of them, or 10%, were owned by the mill, as one might suspect. They even owned and maintained their own fire truck and fire equipment. The one on the left is a fire truck, and the one on the right is a tanker. They are both standing in front of a building that continues to exist to this day, and is behind and to the left of the current fire department. This again is a photograph of the mill. This would have been taken from approximately where the fire department is at the present time, shooting in a northwesterly direction. In these two photographs were proceeding up Bridge Street, which is now known as the Shawville Road, and this would have been some of the company housing on Bridge Street. This would be company housing located really near the intersection with Main Street, and probably was reserved for supervisory personnel. The mill would be up here and behind it. This is a shot from the other direction, meaning we're coming over the... Now this is actually the same direction because this is a set of steps coming off from where the boarding house road is down onto what was then called Bridge Street. In addition to other things, the mill also owned and operated its own farm. This is the farmhouse run during the period by a Mr. Grant Gordon, whose son is still living in Sheldon. We have bottle caps from the bottles that were used. Of course, milk was distributed to more than just mill employees, and this continued in operation until well into the 1940s, usually around 1950, 1960. In addition to that, we also have this photograph of the mill, in which you can see shooting from a southerly to a northerly direction, this being the mill area, this being the pulp area, and up here being the boarding house road area. And in this next photograph, you're looking at an enterprise that the mill undertook in addition to having the hydro plant. They also had this large water tower. Now, the water tower was used not only to supply the mill with water, but was also used to supply the town of the village of Sheldon Springs with water. So in fact, the mill owned the housing, the mill took care of the fire department, the mill took care of the grocery store, the mill had a doctor, the mill had water, the mill also put in a hydro plant, and so therefore they generated electricity, which was distributed throughout the town of Sheldon, including Sheldon Springs, Sheldon Junction, and Sheldon Creek. In this particular photo shot in the early 1900s, we not only see the Missisquoi mill, but we see the layout of the railroad spur, which was so exceedingly important to the success of the mill. It was the railroad that made the mill possible in all regards. Here's another picture of the mill. And this picture here we're looking at the mill from the west side or north side of the Missisquoi into the area of the mill. There's an abundance of photographs taken of the mill. Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company owned this particular building, which was a store. To the right of the store, you can see the first shots of the Sheldon Depot, or rail station. In this photograph, you're looking at a rather old vehicle parked right here. next to the store. At this point in time, this was known as Depot and Rice's store in Sheldon Springs. And this is a similar photograph of approximately the same time. You can get a fair idea about the size of the store and the fact that at that particular point in time we're talking automobiles because in fact gasoline was being sold. These areas up here were all apartments, and all of those apartments were rented out to mill employees. People who ran the store actually ran the store as lessees. And this photograph with the rail trail being right here and the rail station, this is a little later shot of the store. With a little clearer image, you can see this is the east side of the store. In a minute we'll be seeing the south side of the store. All of the apartments, all the complexes, one vehicle parked here. The store went through a number of different ownerships over time. And in this particular view here, we're again back in time with an old vehicle. And this is before the store had been painted white. So this precedes the one that we just showed you. And the next one we're looking at is the one that was called the supermarket, or if you look real close, it's called Joe's Country Store. Two individuals standing on a porch are relatives of someone we recently interviewed. This is the south side, so this would be what we currently call Mill Street. Notice the age of the cars. Joe's Country Store was, in fact, the last store that survived at this particular location. Joe originally owned it, and then he sold it out to two other enterprising individuals from St. Albans who managed to run the market for a short period of time until it was eventually demolished and the fire station took its place. These two individuals here, running it as the Missisquoi store, are in fact the last two owners of the store. Notice again, this is the south side shot. It's called the Missisquoi store at Sheldon Springs. So the store has quite a history in terms of its longevity over a period of just short of 70 years, or excuse me, 80 years. The last photograph we have is a negative taken in the 1982 survey of historic places, and there is a record on file in the town clerk's office for 1983 authorizing the demolition of this building for the building to be replaced by the Sheldon Volunteer Fire Department. This sequence is a series of shots taken from 1952-54 Smithsonian Institute archive when they sent a photographer into Sheldon to in fact photograph the mill and the things going on in the mill. There's a worker. This one here is of pulp fiber. This is someone actually drying fiber, making paper. This is that stack of logs again. Inside the mill, This was a place that had a lot of workers. And there's paper. And it was indeed prosperous and caused the community to grow. And was a financial backbone for many of the things that occurred in Sheldon during the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and right straight through. This is actually paper. This is a point in time when they were making cardboard paper. As you can see, of its time, it was a very prosperous place. Now this one here is a unique kind of picture because it's taken outside. And we can get some information in reference to date when we take a closer look at this picture. Because in fact, this is the mill. There's some trucks parked. There are tractor trailers here, which is exactly what was there at the present time. All of the houses that were there were taken down. This is the Catholic Church where the Congress Hotel used to be. Down in here's where the bathhouses used to be. This one remaining item right here was the original mill president's house. It was torn down sometime after, I think, 1982. So this is before that. This is the same picture showed you earlier of the building that exists, and this to some degree is involved with the railroad. This is what we now call Shawville Road, going up past the mill, and again on the back side of the mill you can see where the tractor trailers are still being parked here. That would be what you would see if you were taking this walk today. In the area up here, we are looking at the end of Shawville, the end of what we call Boarding House Road. Well, that's a pretty expansive photo, aerial photo of all the things that are happening in and around Sheldon at that particular time. It was people who were involved in running the mill. This particular photograph, I believe, is 1930 something, and it is a photograph of mill workers who belong to the local union and some of their family members. This photograph here is of mill workers only. The guy in the middle was undoubtedly a foreman. Down here were workers. And this is an all-male photograph, strictly speaking, of people who were working at the mill. And the same is true of this one. I think it's identical to the other one, although it's a little bit different. Same thing here. During the late 1700s and the early 1800s, in order for there to be any industry in Vermont, it was necessary for people to find an energy source. And the only energy source available was water, which therefore meant dams. This is the first dam in Sheldon Springs, known as the Upper Dam, directly beneath what is known as the Bancroft Bridge. So in the 1871 map from earlier, you can see that there was a sawmill and a grist mill. The first sawmill was built by Mr. Bancroft. The second one was a grist mill built by, I believe, Sam Sheldon. And then there was another sawmill built sometime after that. In this particular photograph, you can see the bridge over the top, and you can see the dam as it existed. And you might note that in addition to every other things, the dam was being held up with some timbers, and there's a good deal of water stored behind it, which in this photograph will be diverted to your right into a mill which would have been owned by Mr. Bancroft. The other dam built before the latest dam was one known as the Lower Dam, and this one was built at a period of time when the paper mill was just beginning, and this was a diversion of water from the Missisquoi into a pulp mill. Notice on the upper left-hand corner the huge stack of pulp. This one, I believe, is shot from a northerly direction down into a southerly direction. The needs of the Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company necessitated the fact that the upper dam and the lower dam are not sufficient to store enough water to create enough energy to allow the paper mill to continue to develop and expand, and so therefore a high dam was built. The high dam was built where the dam currently stands, just downriver from the current metal bridge, and is probably in the vicinity of 60 feet tall. At one point in time, that was a huge ravine all the way down from the top to the bottom with only water running through it until it was contracted to build a high dam. This is a picture of some of the workers who were working on the dam at that particular time. In the event that you were not working on it but you wanted to watch the work being done, you could go to this observation tower, which was attached to the rocks on the north face of the Missisquoi River. Come down the trail and in to watch. You can see that these weren't workers that were in this observation tower, but in fact guys with suits and ties. Oh, they were foremen and other people overseeing the operation of the construction of the mill. And this particular view, you're looking at some more mill workers down in the ravine of the river actually doing some of the work necessary to prepare for putting the dam in, and to the rear of it is that pulp pile. And in this picture, again, you're looking at workers posed for a picture during the development of the dam. And this picture, actually you're seeing a lot of things happening here. If we bring it up a little bigger, you can see there's a little hut over here. Here's 3 guys. Down here's 1 person. This looks to be a crane of some type, lifting some material here. This would be the north face of the river, and the dam is being built across in this particular area. And there's another 2 gentlemen up here. So this is a fairly detailed photograph before the dam actually ended up being put into service. Where there is water and people live on both sides of a river necessitates the building of bridges. There have been several bridges in Sheldon Springs. If you walk all the way out Shawville Road, you cross the Missisquoi on what is currently the Steel Bridge. But bridges were built here in as early as the 1800s, early 1800s. And if you look on the map from 1871, you'll see a bridge. Right next to the bridge is something called the Bancroft Sawmill. It was Mr. Bancroft who saw the lumber and ended up becoming this bridge. This is a 1887 picture of that particular bridge. It's quite a structure. I think you're talking around 250 feet. All the timbers, all the siding and all the other materials were produced at the Bancroft Mill, and so therefore it became known as the Bancroft Covered Bridge. Bridges at that time were covered because people clearly understood that bridges left to the elements would in fact have the roadbed rot out much quicker than bridges that were covered. So this is another shot of the Bancroft Bridge taken from north shooting to the south. Notice right here's a mill. Okay, this is the bridge, and then down in the middle of the village is another very large structure. This is preceding the establishment of the Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company. Now that probably is known as a house over here too. So the Bancroft Bridge stood there pretty good. This was a shot taken of the Missisquoi River from the bridge. This is the bridge here. Okay, this is the rock bedding below the bridge. There's another structure right here, which is probably a mill. This is the chasm running down through back to the Missisquoi. So right in this area right here is where the high dam eventually was built. But like all good things comes to an end. So it was about 1885, 86, somewhere in that time frame when a flood took on bridges at North Sheldon and at Sheldon Springs. This bridge was built to take its place. This is a steel bridge with a deck, and up here we're going to go, if you notice right here is a horse and buggy in the bridge. Okay, and up above is a plaque which is customary for bridges of the time. And if we can get up there, it says on it, Vermont Construction Company, St. Albans, Vermont, 1887. This looks like a very well-built steel bridge, quite secure, and in quite good shape. Unfortunately, it floated away. And the reason it floated away ended up in a lawsuit because people were responsible for both the bridge and for the footing on the other side. A lawsuit that entailed caused a lot of concern in the community. It was finally settled, and the town had an opportunity to construct a new bridge. And therefore they did. This is a very unique bridge. This one here is a suspension bridge. If you look real close at this article, you'll see that it was built in the year 1888. So these are pretty much in rapid succession, one right after another, after the Bancroft Bridge had been there for pretty close to 100 years, and then there was this bridge and another bridge. This was a well-built, sturdy bridge. There's only 2 of these bridges ever built. One still stands in Keithville, New York, although you can't walk across it, it is still there. This one is no longer there, as we'll see in a minute. Notice all of the steel cables. There's a little house right here. And this article shows it as a 250-foot span and 16 feet wide. Trouble with Messina wanted a double-wide bridge, and so when they refused this one, the Utica Bridge Company put it into stock and eventually sold it to Sheldon at a premium price. It's a very well built, good constructed bridge. Here is another picture of the suspension bridge. It was photographed a lot of times. Notice the 2 ends secured in the rock, suspension all the way across, the water down below. Here is the water going under and down into that chasm that would later be dammed up. And here is yet another bridge. This one we're talking, the same bridge, this one we're talking about shooting from downriver back upriver. So this is actually down in the chasm that would eventually be covered by the dam. It's actually quite a structure. And then lo and behold, one day, it was a spring flood. And there goes the bridge. In this particular flood, the bridge was taken out. There was some concern about its construction. Unfortunately, we can't get any really good readings off of this plaque to understand anything about it. And so the bridge had to be replaced. And it was replaced by another steel bridge. That one built by the state of Vermont. And eventually became this bridge, which is the steel bridge. It was refurbished again in about 1969, 1970. But it still stands there today. Here's the mill down here, the river. Notice the water's high here because the dam has already been built. And that's the story of the bridges of Sheldon Springs. As we leave the bridge area, and here's the river, and over here is a holding pond, which we will take a look at later. Here's a sluiceway bringing water down into the mill. And this is the mill, but the reason for this is as we proceed back down this road, there's a road above us, and this is called Boarding House Road. And it's accessible both from the Shawville Road and from what is now called Mill Street. These were boarding houses where individuals working at the mill had accommodations. This is what it looked like on Mill Street. Here's the plant, and here are the houses with the exception of number 4, which was a private residence built long before the mill got here, and the property was not secured by them. So the boarding house road goes around like this and comes back onto Mill Street. In addition to the boarding houses on Boarding House Road, there was also a school. This is the intersection of the Main Street or Mill Street complex with what is known as the Boarding House Road. The Boarding House Road went around past where these tractor trailers are, turned behind where the fire station is, and then went up in the back where there are still some houses. It is in the back area where all of these trucks are now parked that the mill initially decided to build its school. Because of the population of mill employees, all concentrated within a particular area of Sheldon Springs, it became necessary for the mill to build a school. And in 1918 it built this school, which you can see here. The school lasted and was used continually by the town and the mill through the 1970s before it was closed in favor of the new school, which opened on the other end of town. This is one of the classes from a particular school. Can't tell you exactly when this particular shot was taken. I do know from another photograph that not only was the school here, right directly in front of the school is a spur of the railroad. So occasionally on another picture, I've got a picture that shows a train parked directly in front of the school. As we have alluded to earlier, the railroad was an absolutely essential part of making Sheldon Springs what it was. And after the rail opened, July 4th, can't give you the exact date, but this was the original Sheldon Depot, or train station, shot from this particular point of view. Sheldon Springs. Now notice the old car over here. Here's the railroad track, pretty much as it exists today, but then taking a spur over to the mill. So this was after 1900. And another shot of let me get there. Another shot of the rail station. This is called Sheldon Springs. This is the rail station. Okay, and next to it is a storage facility. And there's not much more to be seen in that one. However, on the next one, we know that if it was the late 1800s and the early 1900s and you were coming to Sheldon to spend time at a resort, you would be taking a train of this nature. There's a lot of people on this platform right now. So this is the east side of the platform. Here's the rail you saw earlier. This is a old steam engine. Over here is a Congress Hall Hotel. one we saw earlier in the picture. So people would arrive and depart from the train station. This looks like a departure. But once they arrived, they would cross over what was then Main Street and go through a small park promenade, crossing over into this luxurious hotel. If you continue up Main Street, there are houses that we will be documented as historic properties built originally by the mill for workers, including some garages and carriage houses. And if you look all the way to the end, the house in view right now is the first house on School Street, which is a documented development location for the Missisquoi Pulp and Paper Company. If you wish to take your walking adventure a little further, this is a hand-drawn map from the Department of Historic Preservation of Main Street. The rail trail is right about here. This is Main Street, the old road to Sheldon Junction, and this is the new Route 105. So right here is what is currently Jolly's, and these are houses. The ones in black are considered to be non-contributing, and the rest of them are primarily ones that were built by the mill. Now these are reverse negatives from the 1982 study, so they're not too clear, but this is what would be the look of the mill house, built primarily for workers and had families. Most were two houses side by side with one garage. And here is another set. This home is still standing at the present time. This home is also still standing at the present time. Notice the number of windows at the top, the older car parked in the driveway. This particular home is now a vacant lot. This would be the post office built after the closing of Joe's Country Store. This was a unique building in as much as it had a stone base on the first floor and then a shingled top and then a roof with a cupola. Someone bought this and determined after purchasing it that it could not be restored, and so in 2017 it was taken down. This particular house continues to exist, as do most of these houses on both the right and the left-hand side of Mill Street as you work your way towards Route 105. In this particular picture, we're looking at a view of Sheldon Springs by a well-known photographer, I believe, named Graves. Notice the old car. If you went back and looked very closely at some of these other pictures, this one is a shot going from what would be now Route 105 down what at that point in time was called Main Street towards the mill. Well, this was a photograph at that particular time. We don't have a lot of photographs of these houses to share with you, but as you turn off of the rail trail and head towards Route 105, the first house, which is located on the left-hand side and looks very large, was not in fact a part of the mill structure. It was indeed a privately owned establishment built by someone who later on turned it into a dance hall, a bar, and apartment houses. It still continues to stand at the present time, and the one way up on the far end of Main Street, there's two of them side by side, one of them currently used for a antique business. That whole span is considered to be historic Main Street in Sheldon Springs. If you leave Main Street, which is located right about here, or Mill Street as we know it now, come out to Route 105 and cross across, you're going to find a group of houses. And this is the 1982 Vermont historic hand-drawn map of what is called School Street. School Street was originally built for workers at the mill. These were smaller houses, a little less ornate. It wasn't built this way. School Street, since the town took over this complex, has been pushed into the center, but this actually is the front of this group of houses, and this is the front of this group of houses. And in between what was School Street, we'll see in a photograph in a minute, actually was a group of, was a park. And the mill built a park for its people to enjoy. And this photograph right here, as we're looking at it, this is School Street. This is the road from Route, the early Richford to St. Albans Highway, going back down into what would have been Main Street. Notice there's nothing in this area right here, which is currently Route 105. There are a couple of things in this photograph worth taking a closer look at. The first one being this particular part of School Street. Notice the park up the middle with houses in it. This building right here, at the end of it, was maintained by the mill as a storage facility for employees. They could rent storage space. And it is my understanding that somewhere right in this vicinity there was also a small grocery store which was off of the mill property and privately owned. As we turn and go down Mill Street, notice right here is a structure that definitely is a barn. This barn continues to stand at the present time and can be seen from the rail trail, which is right here, or from Mill Street, Main Street, which is right here. Notice there aren't as many houses built here, so this complex was built early on by the mill, and the rest of these other structures were not. There is nothing in the middle of this intersection, which would have started out being Webster's store, later to be Luno's store, later to be Pauline's store, and currently is owned by Jolly Brothers. So this is a very early photograph that you're looking at of the aerial view of Sheldon Springs, as well as the mill. Now over here in this vicinity, somewhere right about here, if we can get to it, let me see if it's on this picture. I have another picture of it. The mill also had built, yes, right here's a group of houses, okay? This particular group of houses bears a different name. It's called High Street, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. The mill was first in the business of establishing housing for workers, and then after that had built some others, and some of these houses in here undoubtedly were being used for president and so forth. So this whole area is significant and historic in regards to the mill. If you are so inclined, all these houses were built in 1917. They were in the other photograph, which is called Mill High Street. You find this on Route 105 as you're coming in from St. Albans, moving in towards Sheldon Springs. The side road to Sheldon Springs is right here. Route 105 goes back over toward the mini mart. If you want to walk over here, there are 6 unique houses built in 1917 for the mill workers. And here is an early photograph of those houses. They're mostly all still standing. This shot would have been taken from the north end of the mill. This would be a walking trail probably taking you over to the mill, and this would have been the mill houses, and down here's another building someone else has built, but this would be Route 105. This particular set of houses, along with all of the houses on School Street and the houses on Mill Street that were not torn down in order to expand the capacity of the mill, were sold to mill workers and mill employees during the 1970s. That would end our exploration of Sheldon Springs before we jump back on the trail and proceed towards Sheldon Junction. The photographs and images, as well as the write-up of this particular portion of our rail trail adventure, can be found on our website at sheldonvt.org, and look under Tours of Sheldon. Thank you very much. At a short distance east of Mill Street, the trail veers off to the left, heading toward Sheldon Junction. To our left is a area now covered with snow, but which has ice under it. This short distance, right about here, is where the Sheldon Springs school used to be. School kids would come down without the permission of administration and slide or skate on this swampland where it was all ice. The story John Gordon told me was when he fell through and had to go back to school and spend the rest of the day in his wet, icy clothes. We'll proceed now towards Sheldon Junction. Just short of the 8-mile marker on the trail off to the right is this swamp. Now, the swamp has been formed due to the fact that the rail trail blocked the water from getting into the Missisquoi River. That has been an ecological benefit in as much as wildlife in the form of waterfowl do use this area, and there are lots of frogs and other animals that are here. And it brings us up to the next mile marker is right here. Now we're moving on again toward Sheldon Junction. We are now at mile marker 8, so that's a half a mile on the trail. Moving towards Sheldon Junction in an easterly path. On the right-hand side, a short distance away is Route 105. Right there's a house and traffic on Route 105. And off to the other side is agriculturally developed farmland. So right here we're approaching what used to be the intersection of the CV Railroad and the old St. Albans to Richford Highway. Moving from right to left with the highway, straight ahead was the rail trail. As you can see, looking to the left, the old road continues to be plowed since there are houses and farms out this way. A rail trail going directly ahead. This is the Bergeron farm. And off to your left, you're looking at the Missisquoi River Valley and over to another farm set back off the road. Having run the trail from this intersection back here, this is the old St. Albans to Franklin Highway. Parallel to the trail, which is off to the right, we come across this bridge, which few people see because it hasn't been traveled on since the 1950s. And it is a concrete bridge covering this small brook, and it was built in 1927. From here, the road goes straight ahead and would continue along in a path that would take it over to the Missisquoi River, but not in alignment with the current Route 105, but rather more in this direction, and then along the river it became known as Main Street. As we leave the old highway, come back down the Bergeron Road, we're now back on the original CB rail trail, and we will be proceeding back to Route 105, which you can see as the cars are passing in the background. It's not unusual on the trail to encounter some four-legged friends. This would be Traxima Fox, who traversed the trail several times back and forth, went off into the fields and came back. We're now approaching the 8.5 mile marker, and sure enough, our friend the fox has continued up this way. The reason for this stop is these areas right here are significant in history as the gathering place twice during the 1800s by the Fenians, who were Irish, and they were organizing here for the purpose of crossing the Canadian border, which is a short distance over there, in order to free Canada from the English. There's a lot more information in that regards on our website. On our left along the trail is the Briette Farm. This farm has been here in continual operation for pretty close to 100 years. Richard and Marie purchased the property. Their sons run it at the present time. Marie, who was a postmaster in Sheldon for a number of years, continues to live in the house across the street. This particular structure was photographed in the 1960s, and a puzzle edition was put out for a jigsaw puzzle in 1962. We do have a copy of that.